Good evening, all of Who Dat Nation, and a special good evening to our Bayou Blitz family. We're doing it again. Happy Wednesday on a Thursday. I hope all of you are doing very, very well out there. I hope you're staying cool when possible. I am Bob Rose. I am one of your co-hosts to your Bayou Blitz podcast. Joining me is my partner, my friend, and our traveling salesman who seems to be back home, at least for now, Brendan Boylan. Brendan, happy Thursday.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah. Before we got on, I was telling you like Tuesday was like a 15-hour day. So all the way up to Virginia and then ended the day in Atlanta. So it was a long day, but I got back today a couple hours ago and home for now. You know how it goes. So, but the Saints have kept you very busy with article writing. They've kept me pretty busy trying to keep up while I'm on the road. And let's just dive in. I think first and foremost, some big news a couple of days ago. The Saints decided to make a couple splashes in free agency right when training camp opened. So let's start with the biggest one. I think the biggest splash simply because I didn't see it coming. Not a lot of people did. But reportedly it had been an ongoing conversation for a while now. And that is the Saints reuniting with Jimmy Graham. So I think it's appropriate to start at the end of Jimmy's tenure with this conversation, because Jimmy left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths when it comes to the Who Dat Nation. And how it happened, being this big, dominant tight end, I mean, I still go on record saying if he stayed in New Orleans and was healthy, that he could have gone down as the greatest receiving tight end of all time. Just because no one was as fast. I mean, there were certainly people as strong. I mean, Gronk might even be stronger, but the athletic capabilities of Jimmy Graham coming from a world of basketball, he was a matchup nightmare for everybody. But the breakup happened. There was the weird how he was going to be tagged as a tight end or a wide receiver. And so that happened. And then a year or two goes by, and then kind of out of the blue traded to Seattle. And some of the comments Jimmy had made about New Orleans and the situation there, I think a lot of people were left unhappy. So I think this is a very unique way to mend what was maybe a broken relationship. But it certainly looks like Jimmy's happy to be back, excited to be back. I know a lot of fans are as well. But it fills one of those smaller needs you and I were talking about just a couple of weeks ago when we were breaking down offense and defenses and needs. Tight end was one where it was like, well, I think we both agreed they might bring in a tight end to mentor. Mm-hmm. And you want to talk about, in terms of size, athletic ability, a really good mentor for Juwan Johnson. I think Jimmy Graham certainly fits that mold. I saw you grab the McFarland figurine from behind you. So what's your thoughts, just initial thoughts on Jimmy Graham returning? Is it 9 years later?
Yeah. My initial thoughts were what a lot of the fan bases were was excitement. But then you had to bring yourself back down to earth relatively quickly, and you realize that this is a 36-year-old football player. He'll turn 37 in November. He hasn't played NFL football in almost 18 months. And at the end of that, when we last saw Jimmy Graham with the Chicago Bears, and even the last couple years before that with the Green Bay Packers, he already wasn't nearly the same player that we had become accustomed to seeing in New Orleans. As a matter of fact, by 2014, although Jimmy was still putting up very nice numbers, he didn't athletically look the same to me even then. And folks, that was a product of smaller defensive backs, as you said, Brendan. They couldn't physically match up with him. So what would they do? They would take shots at his knees. And I mean 5, 6, 7 times per game. Jimmy was getting shots at his knees. There's all those infamous highlights of him, especially while with the Saints, hurdling defenders. Well, that's because he had to keep his ACL and MCL intact. So that kind of thing is certainly going to slow a player. Age, father time, all those things will slow a player. So once I brought myself back down to earth like that, I realized, and I've been telling people this, folks, there's no lock that Jimmy Graham makes this team. It's not a guarantee whatsoever. Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, they're still going to be your top 2 tight ends. If Jimmy has anything left in the tank, and for nostalgic reasons, I certainly hope he does, because he was one of my favorite Saints of all time to watch. But if Jimmy has anything left in the tank, he's going to be a limited football player. He's going to be a situational player, because even though he's not nearly the athlete he once was, he's still 6'7". He can still catch. He can still run very good routes. And he still has that basketball player's mentality. He knows how to use his body to shield defenders. All those factors alone should make him a factor near the end zone, where this team has struggled a lot in the last 2, 3, 4 years even. It'll be a factor near the end zone if he could still play. And again, situational football, when the Saints go, 5 wide, he could be part of that 5 wide and be that matchup nightmare, size wise, for safeties and several linebackers. Having said all that, I'm certainly excited to see what, if anything, Jimmy Graham has left in the tank. And I don't think there's a person on the face of the earth that can say that they saw this move coming. I mean, the Saints did a great job. I'd like to think that several of us are on top of leaks pretty quickly, get them published, get them out to you guys, the public, pretty quickly. New Orleans and Jimmy kept a wonderful lid on this. I'm talking like CIA, KGB type of type of cover up. You realize, Brendan, that they actually brought him into town late Sunday and had a workout with him on Monday. Not a single reporter was able to report on it because we didn't know. That news literally came out of left field, and that was only one of a flurry of moves that the Saints made on Tuesday. And I know we'll talk about that. The other moves that they made in a minute, but Jimmy Graham is certainly the splashiest name. Hell, who knows? Maybe Mickey Loomis and company. Maybe they were listening to us when we did our 2011 show, when Kyle Mosley and I did our top 10 Saints countdown. Jimmy Graham is obviously extremely featured throughout Saints history. I mean, only 5 years in the black and gold, and really one of those years, his rookie year of 2010, he was a part-time player. So 4 years as a full-time player, and this man is 6th in the team history in receiving yards. 6th in receptions, and third in touchdowns. That's mighty impressive. And again, we shouldn't expect him to be that same kind of player. But for nostalgic reasons, it was a great PR move by the Saints. And again, what do you have to lose? Like you said, Brendan, Juwan Johnson plays tight end in a very similar style that Jimmy Graham played. He's more of a move guy, a guy that you want into space coming out of the slot or even out wide. Well, Jimmy can help mentor Juwan on how you can get open, doing that kind of thing. It'd be the historian in me wants to see this work out. Even if Jimmy is only a part-time player, for a year or so, and goes out on a positive note, after leaving New Orleans during the 2015 offseason with a bit of a bitter taste.
I think the one thing when it comes to Jimmy is, and you brought up all the numbers during his tenure in New Orleans, he should have shattered every team record that there was. And you mentioned the departure time in 2015, and you look at 15 and 16, really 14, 15, 16, and being really down years for the team, he would have been a lone bright spot. Now, in the trade, I know you get Max Unger, who was a really good center for New Orleans and what have you, and then a first round pick as well in that trade. But even in those bad years, Jimmy would have been a bright spot for that team. And then going into 17 and 18, if Jimmy was retained, I mean, you can play the what if games all you want, but I go back to 2018 and the NFC Championship, a game that Benjamin Watson missed. And Ben had a great few years in New Orleans and really helped a depleted tight end group. Can you imagine if Jimmy Graham was on that team?
Mm-hmm.
Even if Jimmy was 70% the player he was in 2014, 2015, maybe even less. If he was 50% of the player, I mean, you're talking about a completely different story. For a nostalgia factor and how much you and I talk about loving that 11 team so much, Jimmy coming back was one I didn't see coming. Certainly one I'm excited about. But to your point, I think it's really important. And I even told somebody this today on the phone. We were talking about, Jimmy Graham. Nobody saw it coming and da-da-da-da-da. And I said, yeah, but the one thing people have to remember is Jimmy Graham isn't going to be the number one or the number 2 tight end. I said, if anything, Jimmy Graham is going to be the one player this year that really pisses off a lot of fantasy owners.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen is it's going to be like, man, I got Olave, I got Kamara, or I got Jawan Johnson as my tight end 1. And then Jimmy Graham's going to have 4 touchdown receptions all season, and it's just going to be at really inconvenient times for everybody else. Where it's like, man, I could really use an Alvin Kamara touchdown. It's like, nope, fade to Jimmy Graham. I could really use an Olave touchdown. Nope, fade to Jimmy Graham. So, I mean, in that sense, yeah, it's great to see Jimmy back. I know for a lot of people, and I kind of joke about it too, is anything that's been broken will be mended by one dunk over the goalpost.
Yeah.
Even though it's a 15-yard penalty at this point. At this point, if Jimmy scores in the Superdome, do you just bite the bullet and go just do it?
Absolutely.
Just do it. Like, who cares? It's 15 yards. It's whatever. Just do it. Because the dome would be rocking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of things will just like anything. I mean, Drew used to say this a lot too, is like winning fixes everything. So if Jimmy goes out there and contributes even a little bit to winning, scores some touchdowns, everything will be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, for me, I was at the game where he bent the goalpost back in the Georgia Dome. And I can tell you, because at that point I was in high school. So sorry, Bob. Sorry, I know I did the age thing. I did the age thing to Bob. Anyway, I wasn't writing, I wasn't working or anything covering this team. So I'm sitting in the nosebleeds because that's what I can afford. And nowhere during that 30 minutes was there any announcement from the PA. So we're sitting there like, what is going on? Why have they not kicked an extra point yet? Like, at first you're like, oh, are they reviewing something? Like, maybe he stepped out?
Right.
Whatever. And then after a while, you're like, no, this is way too long for a review. Is someone hurt? You got to pull out your binoculars from the nosebleeds. Is somebody hurt? What's going on? And then you finally realize when they pull out the ladder, you're like, oh, he bent the goalpost. It's like, that's a cool nostalgic moment for myself. It's cool, nostalgic that he's coming back. The best thing you said in all that, though, there's no guarantee he makes the team. And this is what I want to touch on, because people are going to be like, wait, Bob, he took media photos, like media day photos. Everyone takes media photos. Everyone takes photos because for us, the media, it's really convenient to have updated photos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everything. And that's across sports. It's not just football, basketball, hockey, baseball. I'm sure tennis does it. Everybody takes updated photos at the beginning of whatever the season is, whatever the tour dates are, PGA, like all that stuff. Everybody takes updated photos. That doesn't mean anything. It's nice that Saints social media released them. It's nice that we have them. But just because he posed in the jersey and the helmet a little bit, it doesn't mean, and the Saints are posting, on social media, it does not mean he's guaranteed to make this team.
Yeah,
know?
and people have reached out to me too and said, he does a lot of bike ride. He's an avid bike rider, which is true. And he looks like he's in great shape. He keeps himself in great shape. Yeah, he does and always has. He is the definition term freak athlete, but there's a difference between being in shape and being in football shape. Those are two different things, folks. And we will find out relatively quickly, whether Jimmy Graham has anything left in the tank. And if he does, he could certainly be in a position to contribute for this New Orleans offense, which now feels like it has weapons all over the place. And he feels the need of another big body pass catcher like you and I have been talking about most of the offseason. You have Michael Thomas, but his questionable health. You have Foster Moreau. You have Brian Edwards that you added. Now you have Jimmy Graham. And again, whether or not Jimmy can still run, I doubt he still has that 4.5 speed, but he's still 6'7". He can still box out defenders and he can still catch. So, if he can move at all to get in position, I think that he can contribute to this Derek Carr-led offense.
I'll put it this way, and we'll kind of close out on Jimmy Graham. Look at Tony Gonzalez towards the end in Atlanta. Tony was never a big, he was always huge, good box out, basketball-like skills, all that stuff. But he was never a particularly fast tight end. But but what was he used for? 5-yard curls. Go get a first down. 5-yard curl. Stand right at the goal line, catch the ball. And he made a living doing that. And certainly prolonged his career doing that as well, opposed to what he was doing in the very early Kansas City days. Jimmy can still do that. I think, personally, Jimmy will make the team. I think the role needs to be really defined, very much defined. But at the same time, I think Jimmy knows at this point in his career, I'm not one. I'm lucky to be two. He's going to be a situational football player. And like you said, it's going to be third downs. It's going to be the end zone just because of his size, his ability to box out, his ability to maneuver his body really well. Like, the brain is still there. The things that made him special is still there. That's all. But that's it. They're not going to ask him to inline block, right? They didn't ask him to do that however many years ago. They're not going to ask him to do that now. They're going to line him up as a big body guy for third and short, third and long, fourth downs, 2-point conversions, red zone, goal line. And that's what it's going to be. And you're not going to see him put his hand in the dirt. He's going to line up as a receiver. Not a whole lot's going to change from what his role was all those years ago, 9 years ago. That's crazy to say. 9 years ago, his role's not going to change a whole lot outside the fact that he's not going to be playing. It's the only thing that's going to change. You're going to see the same old. Go out there, we're going to throw it up, we're going to pray that you catch it, come down with it. That's going to be that. But I'm very excited. It's nostalgic. Like you said, Bob, he was undoubtedly the best tight end. It's nice to see a happy ending after everything that happened. It's nice to see it come back. And, Drew was even begging for him to come back at points on TV. So it's nice to see it finally work out. But let's move on to some of these other signings. As I always like to say, especially when we do draft shows, the non-sexy guys. The non-sexy guys, the offensive linemen. And the Saints certainly got some. And that was one. They must be watching our show, listening, Bob, because what were we talking about the other week? If we had any concerns about depth on the offensive side of the football, where was it? Tight end and offensive line. Everywhere else looked really good. The receivers almost have too much depth. The running backs, very, very solid, and they might have the best backup quarterback in football, which the Saints have kind of made a habit of the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Because you said that about Andy Dalton, you said that about Jameis when he was back up to Drew. So the Saints know what they're doing in terms of the quarterback room. But Tight end, question marks. Address it with Jimmy Graham. Offensive line, question marks. They go get 2 guys, including Trey Turner, who's a guy that people know from his time at LSU, but also his Pro Bowl days in the NFC South as a member of the Carolina Panthers. Bob, guard is a spot with Andrus Peat that you never know. They go and they get a guy. If Trey Turner can be half the guy he was in Carolina, I think they got a pretty solid guy. What's your analysis on that?
Yeah, no doubt about it. I thought that was going to be the splash signing of the day on Tuesday. I think it was the day before, or sometime over the weekend. We at the Saints News Network, we did put out a piece, an available free agent piece, for potential positions of need. And some offensive linemen, were listed. I don't recall whether I had listed Trey Turner there or not, but I knew he was available. And then when they brought him in for a visit on Monday, that definitely piqued my interest. Now, for name value, Jimmy Graham obviously stole the headlines on Tuesday. But for scheme fit, for depth fit, Trey Turner might be, along with Max Garcia, by the way, but we'll get into Max in a minute. Bringing in Trey Turner and Max Garcia along the offensive line were, in my opinion, huge moves. Both guys have been guards. Garcia can play, either guard spot as well as center. Turner, like you said, not only a New Orleans native and LSU star, but not just a Pro Bowler, a 5-time Pro Bowler with the Carolina Panthers. Now, that was earlier in his career. I don't think he's made a Pro Bowl since 2016, 2017. But the last couple of years, for Washington most recently, he's still a starter. And I think that's very noteworthy because, as I've said, as both of us have said about Andrus Peat, it's not a question of if Pete misses time with injury, it's when. Andrus has missed 40 games in an 8-year career, including 19 in the last 2 years. So, we've seen too many times in recent seasons when more than one injury has hit the Saints offensive line, where we're seeing not only shuffling and guys playing, out of position, but guys being signed off of the street literally hours before game time and thrust into a starting role. Now, with Trey Turner and Max Garcia both, you have capable starters. Now, I'm not saying either one of these guys are going to challenge for a starting role. I would think that's still Pete's to lose, and Cesar Ruiz as well. And oh, by the way, Ruiz is coming off of a foot injury that prematurely ended his year last year. Not to mention the fact that Ruiz has been in the league 3 years. The first 2 of those years were not good. So, I expect good things out of Cesar Ruiz this coming year. But if he regresses to the bust type of player that a lot of people, myself included, were calling him, you need depth here. Eric McCoy, the center, has missed time over the last couple of years with injuries. When that's happened, Ruiz has shifted over into the center spot. That's been one of the things that they've done. So again, you need someone to fill in at guard. Calvin Throckmorton has been a capable replacement, but if Throck has to play more than 5 or 6 games for you, his lack of athleticism and slow feet, for a big man anyway, slow feet, they kind of get exposed. James Hurst, he'd be an outstanding fit at guard, but they want Hurst to be their first tackle available if something happens to Ryan Ramczyk or Trevor Penning. And oh, by the way, Trevor Penning re-injured a foot today and is now listed as day-to-day. When that kind of thing happens, James Hurst is going to be your tackle. So, with so many question marks, no disrespect to the undrafted linemen that that they brought in and had brought in, guys like Throckmorton, Mark Evans, Lewis Kidd, etc. With Trey Turner and Max Garcia both, you have capable starters, who are not over the hill, at least age-wise. They've shown very little drop-off in their game, in the way that as recently as last year, both of them were still consistent starters in this league. Again, just like with Jimmy Graham, there's no guarantee that either one of these guys make the team. but I like their odds. And I now all of a sudden feel a lot more comfortable with the depth that the Saints have along their interior offensive line.
I feel 120 times better about the depth that the Saints have at this point. Look, I think at the end of the day, some of our concerns with the Saints offensive line wasn't necessarily that they were youthful, because they had experience there, but it was youthful in the sense that there was no true starting experience. Right? And in the fill-ins that we had throughout the last few years, they were good in fill-in spots, right? To come in and start a game here, start a game there. But as you alluded to, weaknesses showed, and weaknesses were picked upon as the weeks went on. You and I both like Calvin Throckmorton as a reserve. I think he certainly has a spot on this team. But to bring in two guys that, as you alluded to, were starters last year, a guy in Turner who, believe it or not, graced the cover of Sports Illustrated, at least regionally, at one point, being highlighted as like the NFC South player of the year or whatever because of the consistent Pro Bowl bids. When you get a guy like that come in and not just compete for himself, but challenge some of these younger guys, that's a really valuable thing. And the Saints, for a stretch there, were viewed as the best, if not one of the best, offensive lines in football. And while I still think there's some truth to that statement, I think the depth portion certainly dropped them on that list the last couple of years. And it became evident because of injuries, like you said. Andrus Peat, almost 20 games in 2 years. So I really like that for New Orleans, bringing in veteran guys that are capable. They're not just camp bodies. And you and I hate that term. We've talked about it. But very clearly, these aren't guys that are like, let's just fill out the roster and see what happens. Like, these are guys like, hey, we got to see if these guys can come in. We liked what they did when we brought them in for their workouts. They passed the physicals. Let's see if they can make this football team. Like, these guys can clearly make our team better. Let's go ahead and bring them in. That's what I liked about New Orleans. And oddly enough, Bob, if Tuesday didn't happen the way that it did, I think you and I would be coming to this show a little bit differently, going, okay, training camp starts, yay, it's happy time, but there's still issues here, and here.
Right.
Why haven't they done anything? They just wanted us to wait till last minute. But they, like I said, they must have been listening, because the two things on offense that we were concerned about, they addressed. Now, defensively, there's still one really big hole that we've talked about, I don't know, just all summer long, that I would like for them to address. Doesn't look like it's going to get addressed, but maybe if we talk about it, the front office that clearly listens every week, we'll see, try to make us happy. But I think ultimately they improved depth. And Bob, you can attest to this a little bit more as well. When you look at teams over the last decade that have made the playoffs, made deep playoff runs, and even have won the Super Bowl, what's one thing outside of quarterback play that separates them?
More often than not, outside of the Cincinnati Bengals, more often than not, it's been the health and effectiveness of an offense. Was that not the answer you wanted?
No, you completely froze, and I was like, where'd you go?
Okay, I said more often than not, outside of the Cincinnati Bengals 2 years ago, it's been the health and effectiveness of the offensive line.
Yes, exactly. That's a crucial thing. Super crucial thing. The Saints add depth to what I think is the most important part of an offense, outside of the quarterback. Quarterbacks have to make decisions. I don't think the Hogs get enough love. They never do. But they're vital to any. I mean, I know he's your favorite player of all time, but he won a lot of Super Bowls. Brady won a lot of those Super Bowls because of two things. The offensive line kept him off of his butt.
Yeah. So the officials, but I get what you mean.
And his defense was pretty good most
Uh-huh.
years. There's a recipe to that. It's not just Belichick and Brady. There is something about that, and Bob said, to your point, outside of Cincinnati, everyone that's been in the Super Bowl has had a strong offensive line. I do want to touch for half a second before we move on to Saints training camp, because we did talk about the Cincinnati Bengals there. What bad news coming out of Cincinnati, and for LSU fans who are still holding their breath waiting for an official diagnosis, with Joe Burrow going down non-contact here early in training camp. I also feel, Bob, when you have a player like that, like Burrow, the Burrows, the Mahomes, the Jalen Hurtses, the next line of great quarterbacks in the league, throw Herbert in that conversation as well. It's not good for the game to see guys go down like that either. Josh Allen in that mix as well. I'm definitely missing quarterbacks, but you guys get the gist. Like these guys are the guys you go out to the grocery store, even in Pittsburgh, and you're walking around, you see these kids in Mahomes jerseys, Burrow jerseys, Josh Allen jerseys, Herbert jerseys.
Mm-hmm.
These are the guys that are influencing the next generation. So it pains me to see an injury like that. Hopefully it's not serious, but it certainly didn't look good.
No, it didn't. And I mean, to your point, the corrupt Goodell regime in particular has gone out of their way to protect quarterbacks. Sometimes I say things tongue in cheek. Sometimes I make things pretty blatantly obvious. But regardless of how you feel about it, the league realizes that these guys are the face of their game. Of professional sports, really, outside of a couple names in the NBA and a couple names in the NHL, et cetera. So they need these guys to stay healthy. And nothing is more heartbreaking, especially if you're a fan of a specific team, than to see a player, one of your star players, especially the face of your franchise, go down in a freak non-contact drill. And we saw it with Burrow. It's being the last I saw. They suspected it's a calf injury, and he'll miss some time, but it's not serious. But we also saw Dolphins cornerback Jalen Ramsey go down with a knee injury today, and he'll have surgery and will certainly miss the start of the season. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson for the Detroit Lions a couple days ago, went down with what I believe was a knee injury. I know it was a leg injury. He'll miss some time, and has yet to be determined when he'll come back. We've seen these kind of things happen throughout the league, and it can't be helped. If you play right, if you play sports at any level, these kind of things happen. Heck, even if you don't play sports, these kind of things happen. It's heartbreaking when it happens to your team, and it's heartbreaking when it happens to a star player, especially one of the league's good guys like Joe Burrow. So we're certainly rooting for him, to be back to health, relatively quickly.
Absolutely. Let's talk about some training camp. I think even trying to keep up while you're on the road is not the easiest thing in the world. Did see Derek Carr had some struggles. Saw that the defense played particularly well. One thing that really stood out to me, though, Bob, very short clip, very short video, but what I thought was a very important video, especially as you begin a new season with a new quarterback and a lot of new coaches, a lot of new faces, a lot of guys just trying to get acclimated with each other. There was a particular route, very simple drill where Shaheed runs, it's probably like a 5-yard in, and Carr throws the ball, but then Carr goes like, no. And he asks Shaheed to come back. showed him how he wants it ran, and had Shaheed run it again before they swapped out receivers. And it was just this one-on-one moment with a young receiver and a new quarterback trying to get on the same page. Now, some people might find that discouraging. Like, why are we, they should be on the same page. Blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, to see that in day 1 or day 2 of camp, and seeing the leadership that Derek Carr possesses, and seeing how he's already coaching and encouraging guys like Rashid Shaheed, a really young receiver in this league, I think that's something that has to be noticed and something that has to be positive, despite some of the struggles that Carr may have had in 7v7, 11v11s.
Yeah, I love to see it. I love to see the quarterback especially take on the leadership role, especially with the young receivers, like Shaheed, Alave, A.T. Perry, the incoming rookie. If I'm the coach, I would much rather sit back and have my quarterback do that kind of thing than me having to step in and do it myself. Why? Because the quarterback is the guy that your team is looking to in the huddle, play in and play out, week in and week out. And your quarterback is the guy that the receiver has to work up a chemistry with. Could have the best chemistry. I could be the coach, and Shaheed could have the best chemistry in the world with me. But if you're my quarterback and his chemistry with you is only so, that's not going to end well. I would much rather him have a so-so relationship with me, but a great relationship with you, because again, you're the guy that's going to be looking for him in key situations when these plays count for continuing a drive, putting points on the scoreboard, the difference between a W and an L at the end of the day. Everything that we've heard and seen about Derek Carr, through his career, is that he is a vocal leader. That's already starting to take form. We saw it through minicamp about 6 weeks ago now, and now we're seeing it from the onset of training camp. Which, again, I absolutely love to see that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think the quicker, and we talked about this even before training camp started, the quicker that all of this starts to gel, the better it's going to be. And anybody that expects this to happen like that is crazy. We've talked about this before. Saints fans have been spoiled over the last however many years that there wasn't a whole lot of change up until recently, right? You had Sean, you had Drew, and the offense was like a well-oiled machine.
Mm-hmm.
There was not many bumps in the road for them as an offense. Defense is a whole different story. Special teams, a whole different story. But the offense was a well-oiled machine for the most part. Didn't have to worry about anything. And the last couple of years, because of injury, Drew retiring and injuries, it's been weird. It's been non-characteristic. But yeah, you could come in and pay Derek Carr all this money and go, oh, the offense should be a well-oiled machine again. Yippee. It's just not going to happen that way. Now, it is nice that Carr is working with a head coach that drafted him and he played for him. It's nice that Dennis Allen has his guys all around the coaching staff now. It's nice that Derek Carr has a guy like Brian Edwards who came over from Las Vegas with him to help, kind of learn terminology and just be a settling force in all that. It's nice that Michael Thomas was a big part of Derek Carr being recruited to New Orleans and the relationship those guys already clearly have. That's all great. But that doesn't mean it's not going to take time.
Yeah.
Perfect example. Bob and I have known each other for a really long time now. Let's see. We probably met, 15? So 7, 8 years now. We've known each other for a long time. If you watch the first night that we ever did draft coverage, we go all the way to like tonight with the Bayou Blitz, see what the difference is. Chemistry has to be built. That goes for not just the football field. It goes for the media. It goes for whatever day jobs you guys may work. you don't just come in day one and go, yeah, I'm a master at whatever my job is and I work great with all of my coworkers. It just doesn't happen like that. Now, certainly in football, it's got to be on an accelerated timetable if you want to be competitive and you want to be good. But that's what this training camp's for. That's what the preseason is for. So anybody who's discouraged that the offense may have struggled here early the first 2 days, or the 3 interceptions that Carr threw on day 1 or day 2, don't have an overreaction this early. Because if anything, let's be honest, with how good the defense was last year, how many returners the defense has had over the last couple years, I fully expect the defense to kick the offense's ass. I fully expect it because they're a unit that already has chemistry, that has already worked together, and has proven to be one of the better units in the NFL. To where you have an offense that is very unproven, has a lot of new faces and a lot of new pieces, all trying to be geared into this new offensive system with a new quarterback calling all the shots. I expect it to come off to a slow start. Now, if we're still seeing these problems 2-3 weeks from now, okay, you can maybe tap the panic button a little bit. But I fully expect the defense to be winning all these battles the first couple of days. Bob, are you in agreement with me?
Yeah, I am in agreement with you, and I'll even take it a step further. I'm actually encouraged, by what I've seen out of the offense, even today, and I'll tell you why. The last couple of years, with Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton last year, and Jameis with the pseudo quarterback competition between Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill the year before that. We'd hear things like, the offense won the day. Taysom was 6 for 7. Jameis was 8 of 10. Things like that. But you really needed to look at the footage of those practices, and the offense was, in my opinion, even at the time, was relatively conservative. And what they were doing, the way that they were attacking the defense, very vanilla. This year, based off of the footage that I have seen so far, plus the things that I have heard, it sounds like Pete Carmichael, Derek Carr, and company, they're coming out with full playbook open. And that's what I like. I like the aggressiveness. And when you're going to be that aggressive with so many new faces, I mean, Jamal Williams, Kendry Miller, running back, A.T. Perry, Brian Edwards, James Washington, et cetera, at receiver, Foster Moreau, Jimmy Graham at tight end, Derek Carr, new to everybody, as far as the system goes. So you expect some growing pains. The fact that they're doing it against, in my opinion, certainly, undoubtedly, one of the best defenses in the National Football League, and in my opinion, going against the best quarterback unit in the league, in these 7-on-7s. And by the way, it's more than just Marshawn Lattimore, Alontae Taylor, who's been spectacular, Paulson Adebo, Bradley Roby, even Tony Pride is making plays. This defense is coming out swarming. But the offense isn't blinking an eye. Like I said, they're coming out full playbook open. We want to work on everything right out of the gate. And like you said, 2-3 weeks down the road, if the offense is still having the same kind of struggles consistently, I'll start to worry a little bit. But right now, I'm actually encouraged by what I'm seeing.
We talked about so much, especially towards the end of the regular season, how frustrating it was watching the offense because it didn't seem like there was a fire in the belly to do anything. It seemed like one of those, we're just going to see what happens and hope our defense wins us football.
Mm-hmm.
Like you alluded to, it's early. Overreactions, can't have them. But to see a little bit of fire in the belly, I know it's early in the offseason. I know people want to show what they got. They want to make plays. There's 20 million receivers on this team, Bob. Each receiver wants to try to make the big play and make the roster. I'm encouraged, just like you are. that this is starting to, at least for now, it's starting to look like a Saints offense that I recognize, right? You know, it's starting to show a little DNA of the teams that were really fun to watch over the years. And that was the hope, right? The hope was that if you're going to pay Derek Carr all this money, and if Derek Carr is going to be the starting quarterback for the foreseeable future, if Derek Carr, I don't even know if you could say heir apparent because of his age, but if he is the heir apparent to Drew Brees and he's going to bring the Saints back to the playoffs, you would hope that it wasn't the same system that was being run last year, because then you would sit there and go, man, we paid a lot of money for a guy who really doesn't have to do that much. But if you're going to put the ball in his hands and say, hey, you're going to win us football games, show me how you're going to win us football games. Get on the same page as everybody else, and let's be a well-oiled machine that can go out and drop 30 on anybody any given Sunday. Yeah, I'd much rather see that than maybe if we score 20 points, we'll win the game.
Yeah.
You know, it's much more exciting that way. I'm encouraged. Yes, there are going to be mistakes. Yes, there's going to be wrong routes run. Yes, there's going to be a ball that is just a little bit ahead of the receiver or a little behind the receiver that ends up being intercepted, deflected, what have you. And part of that's just Derek Carr learning. You know, this is going to sound really silly, but bear with me. One, sometimes for a quarterback, it takes you a little bit to realize how fast or how not fast some of your receivers are.
Yeah. It's a timing thing. There's no doubt.
Right. All of it's timing. The other part of that equation, you're going to have one receiver that's like, hey, when I run this route, I want the ball here. You're going to have another receiver that goes, when I run that same exact route that Mike ran, I want it here. And when I do this, I want it here. And yeah, ultimately the quarterback's going to be like, no, can say, no, like, I'm going to put it here.
Right.
And get it. But those are all things you have to work out, because everyone's going to have different preferences on how things are done. And going all the way back to the start of this conversation, that's why I'm encouraged Derek Carr's pulling Rashid Shaheed aside and going, no, rerun that. Because this is when you need to cut out of this, and this is where you need to expect the ball to be. That's encouraging. That's progress. That's improvement, right? And that's all you want to see in training camp is every day. Let's just be at 1% better than we were yesterday. Continue to grow. Let's continue to get on the same page. Let's live with mistakes. Let's make the mistakes now and not in week 1 and week 2 and week 7. But anyway, those are the things I'm encouraged with. Bob, just about 5 minutes before 10, so let's 10 our time. Let's talk about this. 2 days in, I already said a million times, let's not overreact to anything. But if you had to pick one player on each side of the ball that you're going to be watching extremely closely over the next, I don't know, let's say week or 6 days until we're back here talking again, who do you have your binoculars on for the next 6 days on either side of the ball, for any reason it may be?
Oh gosh, I mean, just to pick one player is so tough. I gotta go, and I'll still cheat. I gotta go combination of DeMarco. No, I will pick one, DeMarco Jackson. Because we know, you and I have highlighted all offseason. At least we are still concerned about that number 3 linebacking job. Zach Bond is going to be given the first crack at it. A lot of us believe that DeMarco Jackson would be the favorite to unseat him based off of who's on the roster now. I think if DeMarco Jackson comes out and plays well, regardless of how well Zach Bond is playing, then that will at least start to give us a little bit of an insight on what to expect at that position. If DeMarco doesn't play well and Zach Bond is, well, Zach Bond, it's at that point that all of the concerns that most of us had are going to start to rear their ugly head, and maybe the Saints then go out and pursue on the free agent market one of those names that are still available. And we say the names week after week after week, so I'm not going to rehash them. So yeah, I mean, there are a lot of players, individual players I'm going to be paying attention to, but I want to watch that number 3 linebacker spot, and specifically DeMarco Jackson.
I'll keep it with the defense, then we'll give some offensive names as well. Make it a little easier on both of us. I think for me, and I think part of it's just location and where I am. Brian Breezy, I think, is the guy that I want to see, and see what kind of impact he has, because down in the Carolinas, down near Clemson, people thought that he had some real bright spots during his Tigers career and had some moments that were in question, right? He was the number 1 prospect coming out of high school. There was high expectations, high bar. I believe, he wins Freshman of the Year in the ACC. He has some bright spots. Now, he had a lot going on in his life personally. You guys, I'm sure throughout the draft process, learned a little bit about Brian and some of the things that he's had to overcome, as an individual human being and through his family, and that can directly, affect you on the football field. But you're a first-round pick. You're expected to start, and, this is a Saints team that just unloaded their interior of the defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
And, unloaded it and then reloaded it. With signings and draft picks, and it's expected for Breezy to be a big part of what the Saints do moving forward. Remember how bad they were against the run last year. So I'm curious. Obviously, you're not going to learn a whole lot without contact over the next 5-6 days. But I want to see the type of motor he has. That was one thing that a lot of people highlighted in his draft profile. He's got a high motor. He's a smart guy. I know that's hard to really see and figure out when you're dealing with just cones in front of you and not 300-pound human beings. But I just want to see what kind of shape he's in. I want to kind of see the mentality he has.
Mm-hmm.
Because even in drills like that, you can find out a lot about a player, a lot about a person. So I want to see if he lives up to the expectations of the Breezy that was the number 1 prospect, opposed to the Breezy that, was going through some things on and off the field. A little bit ago. So that's kind of where I want to keep my eyes. When it comes to the offensive side of the ball, Bob, I think there's a lot of places. I mean, honestly, you could just cheat and be like, I'm just watching Derek Carr, see how the offense kind of rolls. I think for me, I'm going to pick Michael Thomas. And I'm keeping my eyes on Mike, and there's not because there's any question to the type of player he is. It's not because there's any question to where he is, because he was a full participant, which was great news. But if he's a full participant, in some of the social media posts that Mike's put out there, I want to see it. I'm not questioning that he can do it because we've seen it, but I want to see it. If you're going to set the level this high for yourself and this high for this football team, you need to be the guy that brings all the intensity. You need to be the guy that is the ringleader of all of it. And again, really hard to kind of justify saying things like that over the next 6 days, because it's nothing's really going on. But I want to tap in and see if that emotion is still as high as it was during the peak years of his career. Because I understand you're not going to get 2019 Michael Thomas ever again, right? You might not even get 18 Michael Thomas ever again. A guy that single-handedly won you a divisional round football game. And that's okay. But if the emotion's there, you're still getting a hell of a football player.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm going to be looking for. Can he set the tone before the pads even come on?
Yeah, and Michael Thomas can be a tone setter. And I'm going to be watching him for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned, not to mention, are those feet and ankles going to stay intact? Yeah. Going to be watching Trevor Penning too, but he's on the shelf again. Obviously, as we open the show with, everybody is going to be watching Jimmy Graham. I'm going to highlight Kendry Miller, though. We simply didn't get to see Kendry Miller on the football field through OTAs or minicamp because he's rehabbing a knee injury. And he started rookie camp on the non-football injury list. He is. I don't know if he's been officially activated from that, but if he hasn't, it will be it will be so in the next day or so. I need to see Kendry Miller and what he can do. We know a suspension to Alvin Kamara is coming. Jamal Williams and how quickly he picks up the offense is another thing to watch. But I want to see if the game is moving too fast for Kendry right off of the bat. Because if it isn't, I think ultimately the Saints have themselves a hell of a player anyway. But I think they have a hell of a player right out of the gate. If he can digest the speed of the NFL game, not just as a runner, because I've seen a lot of tape on Kendry. He has great vision, but just as much as a pass receiver, and most importantly, as a blocker on blitz pickups and things like that. If he picks up those things quickly, then I'm not going to be worried in the least when Alvin Kamara is out suspended. If Kendry is a little bit slow to pick it up, or maybe re-aggravates a knee injury, that's a lot on Jamal Williams in his own first year in the system. I have a lot of faith in Kendry Miller, as you all know. If you watched us even before leading up to the draft in my pieces, I want to see if the kid can digest the speed and intricacies of the NFL game right away.
I'm also curious to see how, I don't want to say simple the Saints make it, but how they kind of bring him in on the process. And we've talked about this before, because he's not going to be number one. And depending on the whole Alvin thing, I don't know how much of a number two he's going to be either.
Mm-hmm.
So how slow do they make it for him to kind of pick things up? Because I think that's important as well. To try to throw the entire thing at a rookie is difficult. However, running back's one of the easier positions. They say. I've never done it.
Right.
In terms of transitioning to the NFL. So, because you're making the same reads, it's just about making that read quicker and getting there quicker. And ultimately, that's kind of where the difference lies. Well, Bob, training camp's a couple days old. It's been fun. It's been exciting. The Saints make some splashes, make our lives a little bit easier.
Yeah.
To certainly talk about and write about and do all that good stuff. But Bob, you have a fun vacation coming up. But guess what? Bob's such a committed guy to you folks at home. We're going to get Bob from the beach for the second consecutive year. We're going to have the Bayou Blitz live back on our usual scheduled program on Wednesday at 9 o'clock Eastern time. In the meantime, Bob, you're still going to be writing a couple articles before you head out on the road. So where can people find you, your work, and certainly all the work of the entire Saints News Network, as it's the number one source to follow the Saints during training camp?
Yeah, we are the number one source to follow the Saints during training camp, and just remember that, folks. Like Brendan said, my work is going to be somewhat scarce, probably very scarce next week. I'll still be with you because this is your Bayou Blitz. I'll still do ESPN's Jordy Haltberg show on Tuesday, unless he boots me off of the air. But you can check out Brendan filling in for my normal spot with Alan Ulrich on Under the Dome on Tuesday. You could check all of us out at the Saints News Network, at Saints News on Twitter, not only through the remainder of through next week, but through the remainder of training camp and well into the regular season. John Hendricks, Ross Jackson are at training camp. Kyle Mosley will be down there. That's why I'm taking the opportunity to take a little bit of time off and hit the beach with the family. But you make sure you catch all of our work, and also be sure to follow to get other people to follow your Bayou Blitz on the Bayou Blitz Facebook page and at Bayou Blitz Pod over on Twitter. Y'all have done a great job of strengthening the base of both pages. We just ask that you continue to do so. We thank you and give nothing but love and respect for the support you've given for us. And thank you guys for making this fun.
Absolutely. Like I've said before, it's like coming in and hanging out with friends and family every single week. It's a whole lot of fun. For myself, you can follow me over on Twitter and Instagram and Threads at BT Boylan. You know what, Bob? I've talked to you about it. but the people at home have got a little tease on it. So let's talk about and unveil our giveaway for the start of training camp.
It's not a shirtless Bob picture from the beach, is it? Because no one wants that.
About that. Just kidding. So our
The
giveaway.
Bayou Blitz OnlyFans page.
Yeah, again, I know I said a curse word today, but let's keep it PG, Bob. I hate to have to go through the ratings. But anyway, no, this is our giveaway. It's going to be a Twitter exclusive giveaway. So you guys head over to Twitter at Bayou Blitz Pod. We're going to be posting about it. We have a full-size display tee included, white panel, New Orleans Saints Super Bowl football that we're going to be giving away. Bob and I haven't decided yet whether we're going to give out it just blank, and you guys can use it for whether you guys are going to training camp yourselves, or whether or not Bob and I are going to write some messages of support and thanking you guys for hanging out with us. The good news is, Bob, I have a couple here, so if we change our minds, we could always give out another one. Hint, hint, wink, wink. You guys are finding out first. But yes, go over to Twitter, Bayou Blitz Pod. We're going to be giving this out to celebrate the start of training camp. I certainly want to give a blank one out. That way, somebody down in Louisiana, when you win, you can take it to training camp. You can send us pictures of all the guys signing it. You guys having a great time down there celebrating the start of the new season. But we're going to be giving at least 2 of these out. So check it out, Bayou Blitz Pod on Twitter, and just be waiting for the updates. In the meantime, Bob and I will see you guys next Wednesday at 9 p.m. Bob, safe travels out to the beach. Certainly enjoy it. I've had my beach fun already this year. I'm going back again too, so I hate to rub it in, but at least you'll be enjoying it at the same time I'm enjoying it, right?
Yeah, right.
Just different beaches. But anyway, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Like I said, follow us on Twitter for that giveaway. And until next week, you guys find some peace, spread love, practice positivity. We'll see you next time on the Bayou Blitz podcast. See you then.